Hello, my name is Marty Frenkel at Madden Hauser. With me again is my partner, Corinne Rockoff. And as part of our continuing series aimed at general contractors and how to assist them in handling operational issues, today we're going to deal with the subject of addressing failed subcontractors.
So let's start out by talking through what exactly do we mean by failed subcontractor? It seems like there are a lot of ways that a subcontractor can fail. So tell me what you mean.
Sure. Well, a subcontractor can fail, as you've already noted, in numerous ways. One, they can simply abandon the job. They can walk off the job and we never see them again. They can absolutely breach a contract by delivering the wrong materials, by consistently providing poor workmanship, by not staffing the project with sufficient labor. They also can engage in and begin to fail based upon something in between, where it's not as clear cut that they've walked off the job or that they've absolutely breached the contract, but they're slow rolling the project. They get behind, they catch up, they get behind, they catch up. We start to get claims and noises from subcontractors or suppliers that they're getting slow paid by the subcontractor. And so there's smoke, but not yet fire.
So in those situations, is there a way that a general contractor can identify when the smoke starts and we're moving towards something a little bit more troubling versus your average, slightly a pain in the behind subcontractor that'll turn out fine? How do we know the difference?
Well, I guess it's just a question of degree and frequency. If you are dealing with a subcontractor that you've had on your projects for many years, and you know the ownership of that subcontractor well, and it's merely they have fallen behind schedule based upon some identifiable event. There's been a death in the family, they got pulled off on another project, they have materials that were delayed, something that is a specific one-time event. I typically don't get very concerned about that. But if I have a subcontractor that I don't know, that I haven't worked with before, and out of the gate, there's an issue. Or even if it's a subcontractor with whom I have great experience, but now this is the third instance that I'm seeing an issue with their performance. All of a sudden, the antenna go up that, okay, something in these scenarios is not going to be right.
And there's a degree of extra caution that I think is natural for GCs who are working with new subs and who are getting acquainted with them. But there's also often an instinct towards wanting to be kind and wanting to give latitude and wanting to be understanding and balancing, I think, that desire to be understanding and communicate with keeping an eye on contract obligations can be tough. So that's an area where keeping your contract obligations in mind when you're working with someone is always going to be to a GC's advantage. But is there something a little bit concrete that a GC might be able to do to protect themselves if they're starting to see those warning signs, but they're not ready to really sound the alarm 100% yet? What can they do in the early parts of the concern?
Okay, so I've always said that being a general contractor is one of the toughest jobs on the planet. It really is. Because here you are, you're sandwiched between owner on this side and subcontractor on this side. So you owe all of these obligations this way to the owner, project owner, and you have all of this obligations and duties to supervise the subcontractor this way. And so one thing to keep in mind is that anything that the subcontractor does that's wrong in terms of the contract that causes a problem in performance of the general contract, you, general contractor, you own that problem. That's your problem as a matter of law, even though you didn't have any control necessarily over the subcontractor and couldn't avoid it. So what are some things that I can do? I'm going to know my contract well. I'm going to know my subcontract. and hopefully my subcontract is pretty robust. So I'm going to put my subcontractor on regular notice if there are issues in terms of their defective performance, because I at least want to set myself up if I have to enforce a remedy, take action under my subcontract. I'm putting the pieces in place, even if I'm providing that notice in a very nice fashion. Not everything has to be nasty, but I'm putting them on notice. That's one.
So beyond those performance-related warning signs, someone's not showing up, things like that, are there other warning signs that a GC should be alert to that may indicate something's going wrong with a subcontract?
Absolutely. One that we've seen frequently is we've received, as a general contractor, garnishments issued by other creditors of the subcontractor seeking to grab onto construction proceeds that are due the subcontractor because the subcontractor owes this other creditor money. It could be a supplier, it could be a bank, it could be anyone. That's definitely a significant warning sign. IRS tax liens, receiving notice of IRS tax lien garnishments. If you're not paying the government, that's usually not a good sign.
Definitely a red flag.
Receiving claims by fringe benefits funds that they're not receiving their contributions, also a warning sign. And then finally being contacted by Department of Labor investigators indicating is a good indicator that the subcontractor is not complying with various obligations.
So if you're hearing about a subcontractor on your project from other third parties not relating to the project, particularly if those third parties are creditors or the government, that's going to be a red flag that you should keep a closer eye on that particular sub.
Absolutely.
Let's pull over for a second and talk about what it means to actually give notice, because I think a lot of folks, when you talk about notice under a contract, you are imagining a big scroll that is delivered in a formal fashion and is on letterhead at the very least. But is that the only way that notice can be effective when you're working with a sub, or are there other ways that you've seen folks use it effectively?
Presuming that your subcontract allows you flexibility in terms of how to provide notice, absolutely doesn't have to be some formal written letter. It has to be in writing, but it could easily be an email. It doesn't have to be this whole long treatise. It could be a paragraph, merely saying under paragraph such and such of the subcontract, we're putting you on notice that the couple of things, 1, 2, 3, have happened that is not in compliance with the contract, and you have so long to go ahead and correct that performance. That's it.
I think that's often a big concern for folks is, if I give notice, is it going to seem aggressive or formal or damage the relationship? But I think knowing that, assuming your contract language provides for it, an email is in writing. And personally, I love an email because it's timed and dated. You know when it went. It says right on its face. And it can still be communicative and conversational as long as it contains those required elements that you're just describing. It can still serve as notice while maintaining the relationship and not necessarily getting into it with your subcontractor.
And further, we'll often say to our general contractor clients that it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. So if I do have a long time relationship with a subcontractor, or even if I don't, as a general contractor, I might call that subcontractor up and say, listen, Bob, I wanted to let you know what's coming. Because general contractor, I have to protect my backside with the owner. Because again, I'm going to be responsible for the subcontractor's breaches or failure of performance. So I got to protect myself first. As much as I might like my subcontractor, I have to take care of myself first.
You like you better than you like your sub.
Yeah. And so I'm going to call them though, and I'll say, listen, this is coming. Don't be surprised. I still want to work with you, but you need to get this cleaned up. And we'll send the email notice.
And remember that those don't replace one another. It's not a phone call or an email. That written notice does have to happen, but you can always soften it with extra communication and preserve the relationship. And when you're trying to decide how to handle things, sometimes I know folks have found it helpful to think about it. Think about yourself in the future. If someday you find yourself trying to look back through all of your documents, through all of your paperwork to figure out where and when did I check that box to give that notice that the contract requires. What can I do that's going to make it easy and clear? Hey, I checked this box, this is done. Having an email written notice is a lot easier than trying to remember and talk through what did you say on the, and that often doesn't even meet contract requirements in the first place.
That is correct. There are also some other things that one can do. Presuming again that your subcontract is robust enough, in particular, if there are payment issues where you see that your sub is not paying subs and suppliers in a timely fashion because they're starting to chirp in your ear. These people are coming to you as GC saying, I'm not getting paid. I will, as a general contractor, exercise the right to issue joint checks. Obviously, that has to be provided in your subcontract, but by virtue of doing that, I can ensure that downstream payments are being made. And again, depending upon the quality of your subcontract, you may have the ability, just as I referenced in the AIA contracts that you typically see with owners, you may have the ability to demand that the subcontractor make financial disclosures to you in the event that you are concerned, again, about their financial wherewithal.
So in that situation, the joint checks not only help protect the subs suppliers, but is there value to the GC's own benefit in protecting those subs and suppliers? What's in it for the GC to put that focus on the folks down the?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is, by virtue of doing that, I, as general contractor, am trying to make sure that I'm maintaining a lien-free project, because if there are liens recorded against the project, generally speaking, my general contract with the owner is going to require me to take action to do something about those liens. And then secondly, if I am keeping those subs and suppliers happy, in the event that I have to terminate my subcontractor, I may be able to resuscitate those relationships to help me finish the project.
You may have heard something about the Builder's Trust Fund Act and some of the specific complications that can bring to a project. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. And by the way, the Builder's Trust Fund Act, although that's a law in Michigan, there are other states that have similar laws or have the common law that imposes what's called a constructive trust over construction proceeds. So what does the Builder's Trust Fund Act do? What it does is, in Michigan, using the Michigan structure, payments are made pursuant to a sworn statement. So if I, general contractor, am asking for $1 million on draw number 6 of my project, that $1 million may have $100,000 for retention, $80,000 is coming to me, and then I've got all of these various amounts that are going to electrician, plumber, excavator, whomever else might be due money on that draw. When the project owner pays that $1 million, it is earmarked. It is sacred. It is earmarked for payment specifically in the amounts and to the parties listed in my sworn statement. So it has it's this mythical protection that goes around the actual dollars that are being paid. And that protection follows those dollars downstream. So, for example, if I had $45,000 earmarked for my excavator, and I decide I'm not taking that $45,000 that I received from the owner under my sworn statement to pay the excavator, but I want to pay myself, that's illegal. I, the owner of the general contractor, can be both criminally and civilly liable for taking that $45,000. Similarly, if I say I'm going to take that $45,000, I'm not going to take it for myself, but I'm going to pay it to the painter, even though the painter didn't have any money earmarked for him on that sworn statement. That, again, is a misappropriation of the funds that's going to expose me to personal liability as the decision maker of the general contractor.
I think that's a higher degree of complication that a lot of folks see a sworn statement sort of as a box to check, as a matter of course. You got to fill it out. It's not a big deal. But it's a situation where failure to keep in line with those amounts that are stated on the sworn statement can have real, genuine consequences, and can also have personal consequences for whoever is signing those sworn statements, whoever's doing the swearing. So beyond keeping an eye on that, if you start to see subcontractor failures, issues with consistency of subcontractor payment, all of those things that can go wrong with subs, where does the risk from those issues really fall?
Well, the risk really falls on the general contractor. So let's take two different scenarios. Let's take the scenario that's clearer, where a sub is either abandoned the project or is clearly and grotesquely in default, and we are now having to terminate their contract. As the general contractor, as I said earlier, I own all of the issues flowing from that bad subcontractor. So if there is I need to find a replacement. So, for example, I have a carpenter, rough carpenter, and I have to terminate the rough carpenter and find a new rough carpenter. And my old rough carpenter, the contract was $500,000, and they performed $150,000 of the work, and I terminate them. I only have $350,000 left in my budget for rough carpentry. I search around, I look for a replacement rough carpenter to come in and finish the work. The best replacement rough carpenter I can find says, well, I can't do the remainder of the work for $350,000. It's going to take me $600,000 to perform that. So that delta of $250,000 in additional funds that are necessary to complete the rough carpentry is on me, the general contractor. I have to pay that. Now, sometimes I may, if I've negotiated well with my owner, have the ability to draw on my contingency. But if I don't, or my contingency is exhausted, that $250,000 is coming out of my fee on the job.
So let's use as an example a scenario where we do have a clearly failed subcontractor, and let's talk about where the risk of that really lands. So, for example, if we have somebody who's coming in to do carpentry, they get halfway through the job and they disappear, never to be seen again. So say it's a $500,000 of carpentry work that was budgeted for, they've already been paid $250,000, and we're coming back around, they're absolutely gone. We're trying to replace our carpenter, and now the only folks that are available to take their spot are going to cost an additional $100,000 over what's left in the budget for the remainder of carpentry work. So there's $100,000 that somebody's going to have to pay to get the work done. Where does that risk fall? Who's responsible for that extra cost under most contracts?
The general contractor is responsible for that $100,000. Now, if you've negotiated well, you may be able to tap your contingency for that $100,000, but oftentimes contingencies aren't permitted for subcontractor breaches, or maybe your contingency is exhausted. So that $100,000 in your hypothetical is coming out of my, as general contractor, fee.
And so when you find yourself in that situation and there's this gap and somebody's got to cover that cost, is there anything that a GC can do from the outset of a project to put themselves in the best possible situation when confronted with a failed subcontractor?
Sure. And although, and this is a teaser for one of our other presentations, is know your subcontract, love your subcontract, live your subcontract. So know the rights and remedies that you have under your subcontract, understand how they fit together and what they allow you to do and relate to your subcontractor, and don't be afraid to enforce those rights and remedies.
Know your subcontract, live your subcontract, laugh your subcontract. I think we're getting that for you as an office sign, Marty. I think it'll be great.